The East Blue Saga of One Piece forms the core of One Piece as a series. It introduces us to key characters, to various elements in the world, and to the core themes that has made the series endure for so many years. What would you learn if you were reading One Piece for the first time, assuming you weren't a speedy reader? What is the point of East Blue? Alright, forced intro out of the way. This video was originally a part of the script for part 1, but then that video would have been over 30 minutes long and taken me over a month to release, so I split it into its own part. If you haven't seen it already, watch that first video. Do it. I know it only covers the first 2 chapters, but it's worth it, I swear. Alright, where were we? Ah yes, it's time to pick up our first crew member. With a crew member comes a crew member recruitment process. Here we begin to learn what Luffy finds important in his crewmates. We also learn about the Marines, their structure, and the types of people who make up the Marines. And most importantly, we get introduced to Zoro. Oda has already introduced a lot of different world-building pieces at this point, but knowing that Marines are going to be a core antagonistic force to Luffy and his crew, he makes sure that their introduction is multifaceted. To longtime readers, it's easy to take for granted the Marines and, by extension, the world government. But in their first reveal, we see a self-aggrandizing person in charge who demands blind loyalty. The person in charge has a descendant who does whatever he wants and everyone is too afraid to stop him. The Marines under the leader are shown to be fearful of the leader, unable to disobey even though they know what they're doing is wrong. They're even willing to die for the leader, and disloyalty is met with death. The civilians meant to be protected by the leader are instead terrified of them and pay tribute to them, and it doesn't matter how poor they are either. This description of Axe-Hand Morgan could also be given exactly to the Celestial Dragons, who we're not going to see for hundreds and hundreds of chapters later. But while we look at the stereotype of supposed to be protector, drunk on and abusing their power type of Marine, we see the contrast. The Marines who defy Morgan's orders, even at the threat of death. The Marines that celebrate at their captain's defeat. The Marines who, against the rules, salute pirates and thank them for rescuing them, and then punish themselves afterwards. The type of Marine that does want to protect the innocent, the type of Marine that Koby wants to be. We'll get back to this when we cover the themes. But first, let's meet Zoro. I touched on this in my Issues with a Live Action video, but Zoro's introduction is impactful, not with how cool he is, but the situation we find him in. All we've heard of Zoro so far is that he is a demon, a beast, powerful, intimidating, clever. And here we see him strung up, starving, even a bit pathetic in how he seems to beg Koby and Luffy for food in his starved state. Then, of course, we see his soft side as he eats the beaten-up, dirt-addled rice ball given to him by the girl he rescued, and Luffy makes the decision that he wants this man on his crew. Not some super strong, cool dude that Luffy has personally verified the strength of, but this strung-up, literally dirt-eating character. Zoro is painted as someone to whom words matter greatly. He accepted his punishment because he believed that Helmeppo would keep his word. He joins Luffy not because Luffy necessarily inspires him, but because he gave Luffy his word that he would join his crew, even if Luffy pretty much blackmailed him into it. Heck, some of the first words out of his mouth are that he is a man of his word. This importance of words is given meaning with Zoro's flashback, contextualized as Zoro's life flashing before his eyes as the Marines are about to shoot him. We see why his word is so important to him, because he gave his word to Kuina, his deceased rival, to become the world's greatest swordsman. If he breaks his word, then that weakens the strength of his promise to her. Oh, you swore you'd become the world's greatest swordsman, eh? Well, you've promised a lot of things and not followed through. It's a common complaint that Zoro is a bit boring character-wise. Sure, he is the rule of cool, but he has some of the coolest moments in the series, but his character is relatively static, at least for the first saga of the story. But I think that just shows how strong his core beliefs are. Unlike so many others, Zoro is not someone struggling against himself, against his past. He has reconciled himself with what he must achieve and pursues his goal. Zoro's story is that of someone overcoming greater and greater obstacles in the pursuit of strength. And the only interruption to that is his dedication, his promise, to his now captain to whom he owes his life. Here's an interesting thing to notice as well. This is one of the very few arcs where Luffy doesn't land the final blow on the big bad. It's Zoro. But notice the dynamic here. There's several layers to this final blow. Luffy saves Koby from Helmeppo, and Zoro protects Luffy from Axe Hand. But also from Luffy's perspective, he shows his absolute trust in Zoro and leaves him his back to protect. Zoro is literally watching Luffy's back here. There's one more level to this interaction too, but I'll touch on it in Luffy's section. I may be reading too much into it, but I feel like this is an establishment of a pattern. Luffy recklessly pursues the goal that he thinks is right, and Zoro covers his back. This theme of Zoro covering Luffy's back will evolve throughout the series, as he does it in more than just a literal sense, but I'll point to those when they happen. This is why it's important that Zoro is so stalwart in his character. Something solid that can keep Luffy grounded throughout the series. Koby also gets some wonderful characterization this arc. We see the type of Marine he will be, and more importantly, what he thinks about Marines that aren't fulfilling their duty of protecting the innocent. Destroy them. And he's not just talk either, he is willing to sacrifice his life to defeat the Marines that he has been so eager to join all of his life. Koby, going forward, won't fulfill orders just because a Marine gives them. He will do what he thinks is right, even if against orders. Even if we won't get confirmation of this until hundreds of chapters later. To top it off, he echoes Luffy's sentiment from the previous arc that he isn't afraid to die in pursuit of his dream, with actions that speak louder than words. And Luffy, we learn what he wants in a crew member, a good guy. Though good is a very subjective term. What is good to Luffy? Well, Luffy first becomes inclined to have Zoro on his crew when he eats the girl's crushed rice ball. Actually no. It's when he tells Luffy to tell her it was delicious. Actually no again. Was it beforehand when Zoro says he has a dream? Luffy loves those things, but no, that's not it. When he learns the truth about Zoro's imprisonment? Not yet. Luffy first expresses that he wants Zoro as part of his crew when Helmeppo reveals that he lied to Zoro, or rather Luffy finally decided at that moment. It's supposition, but I think Luffy was fairly keen on Zoro after his first interaction, but there was something stopping him, Zoro's word. And Luffy could tell that Zoro's word is important to him. Luffy wants to form a pirate crew, wants to go to the Grand Line, and he wants Zoro, but Zoro's got another 21 days in order to keep his word on accepting the punishment to protect the girl. If Luffy takes him earlier than that, he's forcing Zoro to break his word. And our rubber boy isn't going to wait 3 weeks, not this early on in his adventure. So he has to, unfortunately, leave Zoro behind. When he hears the Marines aren't keeping their word, well, now there's nothing stopping him from rescuing Zoro since they were never going to uphold their end of the bargain. Therefore, Zoro is recruitable. Hooray! And now that Luffy knows it's possible without forcing Zoro to break his word, well, now he'll get Zoro by any means. He'll blackmail Zoro, he'll break into a Marine base, he'll use Axe Hand's son as a meat shield. Damn the consequences, he wants something, Luffy's going to do any ill-advised thing to get it. Now let's get to the final blow again. Luffy strikes Helmeppo, Zoro takes down Axe Hand. Here's the reveal about Luffy. He's communicating on Zoro's level. Zoro has promised to become a pirate, and Luffy has placed his trust in Zoro. Trust in Zoro giving his word. And only then, when Luffy has taken Zoro's word for truth, Zoro calls Luffy his captain for the first time. Luffy has turned a one-way relationship with Zoro, Zoro giving Luffy his word, and turned it into a mutual relationship of trust. Luffy is just so good at knowing how to communicate with people, and you're damn right I'm going to point it out every single time. Speaking of which, a quick aside. I wasn't sure where to put this thing I noticed about Luffy, but it's this panel right here. Look at that expression on Luffy's face. This is the face he pulls right after he's caught the little girl thrown over the fence. I mean, that's a pretty wall-looking fence, by a Marine after Helmeppo orders him to. I think this is a rare moment of us seeing when Luffy has put it together that something isn't right. The next panel we see Luffy is when he enters the yard to even suggest that he's looking for good men to join his pirate crew. I think that face that Luffy has is the moment that he decides to do that. But yeah, that panel just stuck out to me for some reason, aside over. But we're still not done. I'm going to lift this next part directly from my issue with live action video, summarizing what Luffy and Koby's parting of ways shows us about Luffy. We're also robbed of Luffy and Koby's farewell. The two of them depart in an interesting way. Koby, interested in joining the Marines, is asked if he's with Luffy and Zoro, two self-proclaimed pirates. While he grits his teeth and says that he's not with them, an honest choice of words for such a good little egg, when the Marine inquires further, Luffy takes the wheel. Once again showing the depth of his emotional intelligence, he recognizes that Koby won't be able to hide his past, so he brings it up clear as day in a way that provokes Koby into hitting him. He then proceeds to beat up Koby so far that the Marines accept that they can't possibly be friends. In one slick move, Luffy has both laid Koby's past bare so he can't be accused of hiding it in the future, and gotten Koby to show how much he isn't a pirate and rejects his pirate past. Last quick point, Helmeppo. We don't know at this point that he's going to show up again, but Oda knows, so he gets a bit of characterization too. The interesting thing about Helmeppo is that, yes, he's awful, but there is something in him that can be redeemed. His father may be irredeemable, slaying subordinates and ordering them to kill children, but Helmeppo, he's not that far gone, at least not yet. This sets us up for his growth. With proper guidance, how can this formerly spoiled brat living using the status of his father become better? Perhaps this means that others raised in a corrupting environment can also potentially change and become better. And whew, we're finally done with the characterization part of Zoro's introduction arc. There's just so much to say about Zoro's character that it ran a bit long. Now for world building. This is the first time we discovered that there are atypical ways of fighting. Previously we saw guns, swords, clubs and fists, but now we see normal fighting methods warped. Zoro uses 3 swords. We've become numb to it after such a long time and how prolific One Piece has become, but 3 sword style is ridiculous. We also see a guy with an axe as a hand, so that's neat. Sure, we've seen the wackiness of Luffy's rubber powers, but that's different than seeing how non-powered people can go beyond normal means. This is the starting point for all of the weird and wacky fighting styles that we see throughout the series. I mean, if there's something like 3-sword style, what other sword styles are there? We're less than 10 chapters in, yet our imaginations can run wild. We also learn about Marines, or rather how there are different types of Marine. That not all Marines are good little beans like Koby, or evil ne'er-do-wells like Axehand. Much like how the previous arc contrasted Alvida to Shanks to show a spectrum of different pirates, and the type that Luffy wants to be, Koby and the Marine Lieutenant are contrasted to Axehand as the type of Marine that Koby wants to be. It's a good way for Oda to say, yes, pirates can be conventionally good or villainous, so can Marines. Don't just decide that because someone falls into a certain group that they'll be a good guy or a bad guy. The world that I'm building is more than that. And of course, we learn a little bit about the Marine hierarchy. Just a few positions at first. We already learned of admirals from Koby, and Axehand is a captain, and there's the lieutenant that defies him. The important thing to draw on here is hierarchy, and that there is a strict one. Those lower on the hierarchy are expected to follow the orders of those higher up. Because this arc was so Marine and Zoro focused, nothing else is really introduced, so finally the themes of this arc. As stated before, this chapter introducing the Marines foreshadows how the world government works as a whole. The whole concept of superiors and inferiors, something natural to a military hierarchy, twisted into those who view people as superior and inferior based on their positions in the hierarchy. And as mentioned previously, this foreshadows the introduction of the Celestial Dragons and their twisted worldview as those who stand at the top of this pyramid. Similarly, it introduces the theme, albeit without mentioning the words, of the different kinds of justice, something personified by the different Marine admirals that we won't meet until later. If Axehand's justice could be called rank makes right justice, then Koby's is honest justice. We're going to see many more types of justice down the line, but it all starts now. We get the theme of dreams getting reinforced here by Zoro, so we know it just wasn't a one-off thing from Koby. We also get introduced to the core theme driving Zoro, honor. Right now it's just embodied by how importantly he sees giving his word, but we'll see this theme of Zoro's evolve as the story continues on, and how it will shape Zoro's interaction with others in the future. The Luffy Liberation Loop makes another appearance as Luffy liberates Zoro from imprisonment, allowing him to continue pursuing his dream of becoming the world's greatest swordsman, as well as liberating the whole town from Morgans' tyranny. With a Marine-focused chapter, you'd think those East Blue questions wouldn't get an answer, but I'm not so sure. It's actually a bit more complex than you'd think, as we get the question in an opposite direction. What does it mean to be a pirate? Well, what changed in the 10 seconds between Zoro saying he wasn't a pirate and then saying that he was one? He defied the Marines and ergo defied the world government. And more importantly for Zoro, he said that he was a pirate. It seems strangely arbitrary, doesn't it? It's important that Axehand is a villain too, shown right after Alvida. The two are pretty much identical, ruling their subordinates using fear. They're also both captains, yet one is a pirate and the other is a marine. Identical actions, but the government allows one, but not the other. Strangely arbitrary. I wonder if the people in charge of the Marines and the world government also make arbitrary distinctions based on personal taste. Wouldn't that be interesting? Unfortunately, I'm much less subtle than Oda is. Or maybe I'm stretching. Just a little. But that's where we're leaving it. 2 videos, over 30 minutes of content covering... Oh man, it's only been 7 chapters. Next time we'll cover, well, at least Orangetown and Gaimon. Maybe more. It depends. I sure went on about Zoro for a long time. Was there anything else explicitly or thematically introduced in our first taste of the Marines? I didn't explicitly mention that Zoro has Kuina's sword, but you all knew that. Remember, try and keep it in the content that we've covered. I'm taking this series as a first-time in-depth reader. I've already started working on the next script. I'm really enjoying going into one of my favorite series in such detail. It helps me appreciate it even more than I already do. I always enjoy reading other people's opinions because it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day.